Hi all, I am going to start my Instagram live about PCOS in a couple of moments here. Just doing a tech check, trying to see if I am bright enough. Hang on. I think that's a little better. Okay, according to my clock, it's 9:59. I'm hoping that I don't have the issues with the sound that I did before. So, checking. Hopefully when I get some people on with me, they'll be able to tell me if they can hear me or not. So, there we go. Hello. So, checking to see if you can hear me. If you can hear me, give me a thumbs up or a wave or something, because last time I did this, I had sound issues. Awesome. I'm getting a thumbs up from Mariposa. Excellent. Good. Awesome. Hey, everybody. Glad to see you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started because it's 10 o'clock. My name is Dr. Lisa. I am an acupuncturist specializing in fertility. This is PCOS Awareness Month, and I'm doing this live video because PCOS is actually a lot more widespread than most women realize. It is actually the fertility dysfunction that has like the greatest number of women who suffer it. It's somewhere between like 15 and often 20% of the population, which is really high. I will tell you that in my fertility practice, I'm a practicing acupuncturist doing fertility in Las Vegas, Nevada. And I think I have seen more PCOS walk in my door to get treated in the past year and a half than I did in the previous 10 years combined. And there are a lot of reasons for this. Part of it is awareness, because awareness is always, more awareness is always better. Knowing what you've got going on means that you can start to treat it and deal with it, so that's a good thing. But part of it is also the environment that we are living in, and especially here in the United States, it is sort of the cultural shift that we've had in our nutrition and in the last like 20 to 25 years or so. So what I wanted to talk about today was just PCOS in general, what it looks like, the fact, what makes PCOS so tricky to both treat and then deal with when you're trying to get pregnant is it actually exists in two of your body system. It's not just a reproductive disease. It is also an endocrine disease. And that's where that whole environmental thing comes in, because one of the things that triggers PCOS is how we are eating. I'm going to talk a little bit about both classic PCOS, which most people know about, but then also something called lean PCOS, which fewer people, including doctors, know about, but it has a lot of the same effects on just how you feel in general and also on reproduction. I'm going to give you some ideas about ways that you can start to deal with it. And why you need to fix the endocrine system issue, which is the root of PCOS, before you start trying to deal with the reproductive issue, because the endocrine issues always block reproduction. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about what PCOS looks like in Chinese medicine. So let's start with what is PCOS. Okay, so everybody knows PCOS as a reproductive issue, and often what it looks like is you have these really crazy, like long cycles. And by cycle, I mean how many days you have in between when you have your period. So your period is your period. Your cycle is day one of your period to day one of the next period. And women with classic PCOS often have cycles that are, over 40 days long. They can be 40 days long. They can be 50 days long. I've had patients who have had cycles that are like they're not getting a period at all. They can be like 8-9 months long. Often women who have classic PCOS are overweight, and that's, and one of the problems, one of the reasons they are overweight is because they're having issues with their hormonal balance. And then they often have like excess here, either on the upper lip, or on the chin, or on the belly. And then some women will notice that they have these dark patches, and often it shows up sort of where your skin gets folded. So on the back of the neck, or in the armpit creases, or sort of in the belly. And you'll notice that you have darker pigmentation there. That's classic PCOS. And women will often be diagnosed with it when they go into their OBGYN, and they'll say, so, I haven't had a period for months now. And hopefully your OBGYN does some testing and doesn't just put you on birth control, because birth control doesn't actually fix the problem. So what's going on? And we'll talk about lean PCOS in a minute. What is going on? So what you need to understand in order to start really addressing the root cause of PCOS is that PCOS is not just a reproductive issue. PCOS is also, and actually at root, an endocrine system. Now, your endocrine system is all those internal glands, like your pancreas and your pituitary and your gallbladder, all those glands that exist inside of you that secrete hormones. And the reason that PCOS is so difficult to deal with is because at root it is an endocrine dysfunction. What does that mean? Well, in particular, women who have PCOS, whether they have the classic form of PCOS or they have the lean form of PCOS, actually have a bad relationship with insulin. Normally what happens is when you eat food that spikes, that requires insulin in order to regulate how you digest it, most people actually exist sort of within the normal range. And when you eat food that requires the secretion of insulin, they actually stay within normal. But women with PCOS actually secrete excess amounts of insulin. And the problem with secreting excess amounts of insulin, if you have PCOS, is that your insulin excess actually makes your body secrete more testosterone than normal. And that's where the PCOS comes from. Because PCOS, when you look at blood work, often shows that you have excess levels of something called androgens. That's testosterone and androstenedione. And those hormones are what create the dysfunction over on your reproductive side. Now, some women don't realize that they have testosterone. And the fact of the matter is that yes, women have testosterone. We actually need testosterone. Normal amounts of testosterone is what gives you your sex drive. And normal amounts of testosterone is actually what tells your ovaries, hey, all those follicles that you have hanging out in your ovary in the protofollicle stage, you need to take some of those out of the protofollicle stage and put them on the developmental pathway. And then what happens is that 90 days later, some of the follicles have thrived and some of the follicles have died off. Just like when you plant seeds in the garden, they don't all do well. And then what happens is that the one follicle that developed the best and is responding the most to the appropriate hormones, that's the one that goes on to develop into a full follicle. Okay. So the problem with PCOS winds up being that in the beginning, when your body is actually relying on the testosterone to start creating, bringing up those protofollicles into the developmental pathway, instead of having a nice little warm little pilot light which tells your ovaries, okay, we need to bring some follicles up into development, it's like a bonfire. Basically, with all that excess testosterone that a woman with PCOS has, a huge number of follicles actually are brought up into the developmental pathway. And the reason this becomes an issue is because that same testosterone that brought those follicles up into development is now sitting on all the other hormones that you need in order to develop them appropriately. So it decreases the amount of appropriate estrogen, it decreases the amount of progesterone, and what you're left with is a huge number of follicles that the testosterone started on the developmental pathway that gets stuck. The interesting thing is that even though PCOS, it's even in the name, it's called polycystic ovarian syndrome, those aren't cysts. They're called cysts, but that's incorrect. What they actually are follicles. PCOS is actually a polyfollicular ovarian syndrome because all those follicles have basically stalled out. And because there's too much testosterone, they can't develop the way they're supposed to. And of course, if all you're trying to treat is that fact that you have lots of follicles, you miss the fact that back over in the endocrine system, you are still having problems with insulin. So every time you eat any meal or any food that, requires insulin to help you digest it, you are flaring out of normal and your testosterone levels are creating, your insulin levels are creating more testosterone. So it becomes a negatively reinforcing cycle where you're constantly provoking that excess testosterone because of the problem over in your endocrine system. And then your poor reproductive system basically gets the short end of the stick. It's the victim, okay? So in order to appropriately treat polycystic, and I really wish we could change it to polyfollicular ovarian syndrome, you have to deal with what's going on over in the endocrine system. So one of the things, like I said, part of what's going on is you are secreting too much insulin, which creates too much testosterone. But it's more than that. The whole issue is that it's not just you're creating more testosterone, but all of your cells throughout your entire body become what's called insulin resistant. Now what that means is that, remember, insulin is there also for the purpose of telling your cells, hey, we need you to function. Insulin basically unlocks the energy ability of your cell to do what it needs to do. Now, don't get me wrong, insulin is not bad. Okay, guys, I hit the wrong button on my phone. Can y'all give me a wave and let me know if I'm still live? Because apparently it told me I paused it. Okay, so are we good? Are we still live? It says we are. Hey, y'all. Shoot. I can't tell if I'm live or not. Okay, I'm getting little hearts, so it looks like I'm live. Okay. Okay, good. Thank you. Tech. Okay, so insulin tells our cells, hey, we need more energy in order to be able to do whatever it is that we're asking it to do, whether it's, exercising or doing work or, laughing or whatever it is. So insulin in and of itself is not actually bad. We really actually kind of need it. The issue is that when you have excess responses to the insulin, then we get into trouble. One of the things that can happen is you get insulin resistance. Your cells are basically so stuffed with energy that they basically, when insulin comes knocking and says, hey, you know what, I need to put some more energy in here, your cells go, nope. We're all full at the end. We can't take any more. We are stuffed. So what that'll do is that'll actually increase the amount of glucose that you have in your bloodstream. And insulin resistance throws off what's going on throughout your body, but it also can create inflammation. Inflammation is another one of those things that shows up when it goes hand in hand with PCOS. And the inflammation creates its own sorts of issues. I talk about this a lot in my Fertility Reset online course because what insulin resistance does and excess blood sugar in the bloodstream does is that it throws off how your other hormones and the other chemicals and the electrical signal actually talks to your body in other places. So inflammation basically acts like static on the radio, and it makes it really difficult for all of your body systems to be able to respond appropriately to the chemical messengering, the hormones that the other, that everything is secreting. So inflammation is a problem, and it is a direct result of this insulin resistance. And insulin resistance always happens when you have PCOS. You got excess testosterone, you got inflammation, and you've got insulin resistance. And these are the trifecta that right now, based on our current understanding of what's going on in PCOS, create all of the various issues that you have. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about lean PCOS. So earlier in the video, I talked about what classic PCOS looks like, and everybody knows what that is. And if you Google PCOS, my favorite Dr. Google, you will see that it talks about the excess weight, the excess testosterone, the hair. The issue is that that is the only way that most doctors recognize PCOS. And the problem with that is that there is a whole subcategory of PCOS called lean PCOS. And the lean PCOS has those excess androgens, or more to the point, the androgen flare, okay, the excess insulin and then the testosterone flare, but you don't necessarily show the excess testosterone when you do the blood work. So usually when a woman who has classic PCOS does blood work, it will show that she has high free testosterone or high DHEAS, okay? And those are the two markers in blood work for PCOS. But a woman who has lean PCOS will often show normal levels of testosterone, normal levels of free, testosterone, often normal levels of DHEAS, although sometimes those might be like just a little bit above normal or on the high end of normal. And as you know, most doctors look at the high end of normal and say, you're fine. The problem with lean PCOS is that they are still getting that testosterone flare. It's just that instead of having constant levels, high levels of testosterone, so here's normal or the outside edge of normal, and here's testosterone way above normal, that's classic PCOS. But the lean PCOS, they'll just kind of spike up and then go down. And then they'll eat something that flares insulin and it'll spike up and then it'll go down. And that spike is just enough to make it so that their follicles will struggle. So they may still have a relatively normal cycle, like between 28 or 30 days. It may be 31 days, it may be 32 days. So it kind of looks normal, okay? But what often happens is if they are tracking their ovulation, and I actually just wrote a blog post on this about just blood work, but I do talk about basal body temperature charting, which is my favorite form of tracking ovulation, because those apps that basically just track your period and then it'll say, oh, well, this is when your period is. All that does, if you're not actually tracking your temperature, is that it takes the length of your cycle and splits it in half. So it doesn't actually say anything accurate about when you're ovulating. And I wrote about, basal body temperature charting and how you want to do that when you are trying to actually accurately track your ovulation. But what will happen is you'll get ovulation past that 13 to 15 day ideal window that I want to see it in. It'll be 16 or 17 or 18 or sometimes even 19 or 20. And the issue is that, you're still ovulating, but your egg has gotten too old at that point. And the reason you're ovulating late is because the poor thing is struggling because your testosterone keeps flaring and spiking, which is decreasing your estrogen and making it just a little harder for the follicle to develop normally. So you'll ovulate, but you'll ovulate late, which means that your cycle, remember cycle is the whole length, your cycle will get bumped back. Or what often happens is you get a late ovulation, but then you still get your period at like day 30, 31, 32. But the second half of your cycle is short because follicles that have been struggling to develop in a testosterone-rich or testosterone spiking environment don't produce progesterone the way they should. So you get a really short second half of the cycle. So the testosterone is really an issue. And even if it's lean PCOS, where you just have that flare and then it comes down, it still creates problems for the follicles, which means that they aren't going to develop as well, which means that your timing is going to be off, which means that it's a whole lot harder to get pregnant because rather than having a healthy follicle, you've got a follicle that it's doing its best, but it's really struggling in this, imbalanced hormonal environment. So what does lean PCOS look like? And lean PCOS is tricky because you don't have the overweight. You're still getting a cycle, although it may be a little longer than you want it to be. Sometimes there might be like one excess hair or just a little bit of excess hair, but it might not even really be showing up. Often lean PCOS shows up what it really looks like is insulin resistance. Okay, so you have all of the markers of insulin resistance, but not all of the markers of full-on PCOS. If you have a lot of hormonal acne, then often there is a lean PCOS issue. And actually, you can see that Face Yoga with Eva just joined us a little bit while ago. Hi, Eva. Eva and I are going to be doing another Instagram Live in 2 weeks on October, excuse me, I keep saying October, September, I think it's 25th. Eva, can you post that in the live chat? When she and I are going to talk about PCOS again, but we're going to focus more on the skin issues and how to take care of the skin issues that show up in PCOS, because Eva actually is an acupuncturist, and she specializes in dermatology. So we're going to, she and I are going to talk a little bit about the skin issues that are involved in PCOS, because it's really embarrassing. I mean, it's really awful if you're 30 or 31, or even if you're in your mid-20s, and you keep getting these incredible breakouts as a result of the PCOS, but you don't know. Great, thank you. It's September 24th at 10 a.m. September 24th. It's often, though, if you have these hormonal flare-ups, it can be a sign of the insulin resistance, which is one of the markers of the lean PCOS. The other thing that often shows up with lean PCOS is you get the hangries. And if you saw my Instagram post a couple of days ago, it said basically, I'm really sorry for what I said when I was hangry. And yes, hangry is actually not normal. It blew my mind when I learned this 3 years ago, because I thought hangry was just a thing that happened. I have memories of being 7 or 8 years old and getting shaky and hangry and irritable and telling mom I need to eat while we're riding in the back seat of the car. Usually it was on the way back from gymnastics practice. And I would tap her, but my hand would be doing like this. I didn't know it wasn't normal. How do you know what normal is other than what your own body is experiencing? So hangry is one of these markers of lean PCOS, because remember, one of the fundamental problems with any kind of PCOS is that you have a bad relationship with insulin. And what happens in hangry is it's not just the part where your insulin spikes and then you create a testosterone flare, but it's the part, what hangry is your blood sugar drops. And that blood sugar drop outside of normal is what then forces you to go eat something. And usually, if you're already hangry and shaky, you're going to go straight for the sugar or the white, because your body instinctively understands that fast carbs are going to bring the blood sugar level back up. The problem, of course, is that then when you eat a fast carb, not only does your blood sugar level come back up into normal range, but it goes outside it. And that's why you get this sort of back and forth yo-yo, or even, it's not even a yo-yo, it looks like an EKG, where your testosterone levels, or rather your insulin levels, are dropping and spiking outside of normal. And then what happens is you wind up flaring your testosterone. So that hangry is not normal, and it is one of the markers that I look for my patients who have lean PCOS, because if you are hangry, first of all, unstable blood sugar control is just not good for fertility. That's the bottom line, okay? So you want to make sure that you're stabilizing your blood sugar levels, because that way you have stable insulin levels, and if you have stable insulin levels, then you're not going to get that inflammation and all that insulin resistance and all that other weird insulin stuff that creates problems with all across the board with all of your body functions, but especially in reproduction, okay? So lean PCOS will often look like slightly longer cycles, slightly delayed ovulation, so something past day 15, and then often that hormonal acne and the hangry. One of the first questions that I ask my patients when I'm doing my consultation is, do you get hangry? Because if the answer is yes, then I know with that plus what I'm seeing in the basal body temperature chart, I need to think about lean PCOS. Okay, so given what we're talking about in terms of both of those systems, so you've got the endocrine system and then you've got the reproductive system, you can now understand why I say you can't fix reproduction and the fertility implications of PCOS without going after and fixing the endocrine system issues first, because the endocrine system's issues are what are creating the reproductive issues. So I have some patients who will come in and they're like, well, I just want to get pregnant. And I'm like, you can't do that. Because if we don't fix the endocrine problems, then your reproductive stuff isn't going to get fixed either. So what I wanted to do was go into just a couple of things that you can do to help start resolving your PCOS. Now, because we're dealing with both systems, this is not comprehensive medical advice. This is not going to fix your PCOS. You may not even see a whole lot of changes with this, but at least you're starting to move into the right direction, okay? So, one of the things that we want to deal with, one of the subsidiary issues, is that inflammation. Inflammation often shows up as oxidative stress. So a supplement that I really like working with for inflammation is something called N-acetylcysteine. It's often abbreviated as NAC. And NAC is sort of like a master antioxidant because it is the precursor to something called glutathione. And glutathione is what all of your cells need to deal with oxidative stress and inflammation. So it's anti-inflammatory. So NAC is really great. Yes, you can get it at Whole Foods or Sprouts or Amazon or most places. You need to be careful with like major national commercially available brands because a lot of the times those brands have, they're not good quality control. I actually I have in my online store at Designs for Health, I have NAC listed as one of the PCOS friendly supplements. And I have several other supplements listed in my store. So if you're interested, you can hop over there. You can go to the store from either fertilityresetonline.com or you go from my clinic website, which is Spring Mountains Acupuncture. You do need to create an account, but what you can do is I actually have a whole list of PCOS-friendly supplements that can help deal with some of the side effects or deal with the underlying causes and also the side effects of PCOS. But NAC is super helpful because anything that reduces oxidative stress will reduce stress in general, which will help start to turn off that static that the inflammation causes in your endocrine and overall body signaling. Let's talk a little bit about lifestyle stuff. So the fact of the matter is, you got to get rid of sugar, okay? Sugar is, we love it. We all love it. As you know, I cop to it. It's like, I love sugar. I actually, by the way, full disclosure here, I have lean PCOS. It's one of the things that looking back at my own fertility journey when I was trying to get pregnant, nobody could figure out what was going on with my multiple miscarriages. Looking back now, I know exactly what it was. It was lean PCOS. So sugar. Yeah, I'm a sugar addict. I love sugar. Sugar is so bad for you. Just period, full stop, end of discussion. Sugar is bad for you. And if you have any form of PCOS, whether lean or classic, sugar is actually like the devil. It is creating a huge amount of your imbalance because sugar is spiking and dropping your blood sugar, your insulin levels, which is creating all the problems. So you need to get rid of sugar. My plan currently is when Eva and I do our next Instagram Live on the 24th at 10, is after that I'm going to be creating a dump the sugar, no sugar challenge. It's going to be a series of emails that can help you through, because getting off of sugar is really hard. Sugar is as addictive as crack cocaine. I know it sounds crazy. The research is really clear. It does all sorts of interesting things to the pathways in your brain about dopamine and all the pleasure centers in your brain. When you eat sugar, your pleasure centers light up like a Christmas tree. So what I want to do is create a no sugar challenge that will help you start to get rid of the sugar, figure out all the different places that sugar hides, because sugar hides everywhere. You'd be surprised at the number of names that sugar has. And by eliminating sugar, or at least dramatically decreasing it, then it will help deal with the underlying endocrine problems of PCOS. Remember at the very beginning of the Instagram Live when I said that the environmental factors are what have been creating all of this increase in PCOS that I'm seeing in my clinic? That's why. If you remember, up until recently, everybody said that fat was terrible for you. It started in the 80s, and everybody needed to get rid of fat. Well, I got to tell you, anything that has had all the fat taken out of it, if it's a commercially processed food, tastes like cardboard. So what did they put in instead to make it taste better so we would all buy it? Sugar. If you look at a lot of processed foods, the first 2 or 3 ingredients will be sugar or one of the derivative names of sugar. And the problem is that all that sugar has made all of us have issues with our insulin. And for those of us who have the genetic predisposition to PCOS, it's basically flipped the switch and turned on the PCOS problems. So you got to get rid of sugar. Getting rid of the sugar will decrease the insulin resistance. It will decrease the insulin flares, which will calm down the testosterone flares, which means that you're going to decrease the testosterone effect on your ovaries, and then you're starting to calm down the whole testosterone problem. And then the final piece, and this is something we should all be doing anyway, and I recognize that this has been difficult as a result of the pandemic, and it's summer and it's hot, especially here in Las Vegas, because, we were hitting 112 for the last couple of weeks. But exercise is really important in terms of decreasing insulin resistance. If you have PCOS, you have to exercise. Period. End of discussion. It's just, you have to, because that's one of the ways that you can actually help your cells re-regulate how they're reacting to all that insulin. I talk about how and what exercise looks like in my Fertility Reset online course. This is not a recommendation to go and start to run a marathon, because there's a sweet spot for exercise. Too much is not good, not enough is not good, but you need to move your body. Look, we were meant to move, okay? All of our body systems are really meant to support us being, spending our days moving and hunting and gathering berries and just moving. And most of us are now stuck behind a desk working on the computer and not moving ourselves. And that disconnect between how our metabolism is set up and functions over millions of years of evolution and how we now live in our day-to-day life is also that environmental issue that we're now dealing with. Because if we're not moving, then our bodies don't know what to do with all this insulin, movement-oriented metabolism that we have. So those are the 3, tips for today. Is you need to exercise, you need to get rid of sugar, and, you might want to try adding NAC in as a supplement, because that will help you. If you want more supplements that are helpful for PCOS, you can go look at them over in my store. So once you start to put those things in place, then over time, your reproductive system is going to do better, because by removing the main problematic factor in the reproduction, which is that excess testosterone and that, overproduction of follicles, or follicles that are being produced at a more normal rate but are struggling in that testosterone-rich environment, then what you're doing is removing the block to healthier reproduction, which will let your reproductive system get back into a better place. So I'd like to finish off my part, and I'll take some questions if anybody has them. And actually, if anybody has any questions while I'm talking, feel free to, type them in, and I'll answer them as I'm going along. Let's talk a little bit about what this looks like in Chinese medicine. So in Chinese medicine, we have 12 meridians that run through our body, and each of these meridians is responsible for an area of the body, a function in the body. There are emotions associated with each meridian, and then also sort of what we call a sort of a global sort of spirit relationship with what's going on. And the 3 of the meridians that are most impacted by PCOS are the spleen and the stomach meridian, and then the liver meridian. The spleen and the stomach meridian, that makes sense even from a Western medicine point of view, because what we're talking about is nutrition. Okay, you eat the food and it goes into your stomach, and your stomach squishes it up and breaks it down so that and in Chinese medicine, the spleen is responsible for taking the nutrients and the vital essences from the food and transforming them into things that your body can use, and then getting them out to the various cells that need them. So we eat food, we digest the food, we break it up, and if the food has a lot of carbohydrates in it, then the spleen in Western medicine actually is associated with the pancreas, which secretes the insulin, and then the insulin is what helps your body deal with all the carbohydrates. So Western medicine and Chinese medicine both agree that the spleen and the pancreas are deeply interconnected in terms of dealing with PCOS. So if you are ingesting a lot of carbohydrates in Chinese medicine, then your spleen is going to be overtaxed. And it will eventually get to the point where it's having a really hard time dealing with all of the energy, the sugar and the carbohydrates and the insulin, and secreting excess levels of insulin. And remember when I said that, insulin resistance is basically your cells saying, we're full, we don't need any more energy. What happens is that from a Chinese medicine point of view, the spleen goes, well, wow, okay, I can't store this the way I normally do. Okay, I guess I'm going to put it into fat cells. And actually in Western medicine, that's also what happens is all this excess energy that you're creating goes into fat cells. So what you wind up with is classic PCOS. You've got that excess weight because all of that extra energy that that your food is creating, all that insulin gets basically stored as fat. So the spleen and the stomach are overtaxed and have trouble turning all this rich energetic food that you're using into, you don't use it all. So it puts it into fat, which we call in Chinese medicine damp. So anyone who is overweight in Chinese medicine has a problem with damp, and what we look at is treating the spleen and the stomach to help it work better with transforming, rather than putting everything into fat storage, actually creating, energy from it and using it. But there's only so much that we can do with the Chinese medicine if you're not changing your nutrition, because the body has to do something with all that energy that you're eating, all that fast, energy that you're eating. So that's why nutrition is a really important part of treating treating PCOS in Chinese medicine, and that's also why in Chinese medicine we can deal. We are going to address the damp, because the fat cells become their own endocrine disruptors. Fat cells secrete estrogen, but they don't secrete the right kind of estrogen that makes your reproductive system happy. No, of course not. It makes it more problematic. So in Chinese medicine, in addition to creating a whole nutrition plan that will help your spleen and your stomach actually be able to function better, but also taking the pressure off your spleen and stomach, we can also do points that will help your body start to eliminate and release the damp and help you, energetically work to get that stuff out of storage and clear the damp and ultimately lose some weight, because that is creating, its own issue. The other meridian that we work with in Chinese medicine is the liver meridian. Now, the liver organ is a really amazing organ. It not only detoxes things, which is what most of us know the liver as, but it also manufactures an incredible number of the proteins and the molecules that we need in order to function. And the liver meridian has a mutually supporting relationship with the spleen and the stomach meridian in Chinese medicine. If the liver meridian is overtaxed, then what it'll do is it can't function. So its ability to create all these good hormones gets thrown off. In Chinese medicine, what it looks like often is irritability or depression or anxiety, because it can't move things smoothly. Part of the job of the liver meridian is to modulate the smooth flow of energy and create and maintain cycles. And if you have PCOS, especially classic PCOS, and your cycles are off, that means the functioning of the liver meridian for creating a smooth, normal cycle has been impacted in a negative way. So we want to assist the liver meridian in helping create the smooth flow of energy and recreating normal cycles. The other thing that happens in PCOS is often you'll wind up with something called, in Western medicine, called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And basically what that means is that the fat has no place to go, so it gets stuffed into the liver. So the liver also winds up being a repository for all that excess energy and all that, the fat that the testosterone is and the insulin resistance are creating. So by helping the liver function more smoothly in Chinese medicine, we can also help the actual liver function more smoothly. And what happens as women are going through treatment and resolving the endocrine disruption in the PCOS, it also helps improve liver function. And by improving liver function, you also help the PCOS. So instead of having a negatively reinforcing cycle, by helping liver function in a Chinese medicine point of view and also Western medicine point of view, we improve the balance of everything. So, and in lean PCOS, we still work with the same things. The DAMP, which is the excess, weight, doesn't show up in lean PCOS, but you still have those issues with that normal functioning of insulin, because remember, lean PCOS, you get the hangry problem. And then often, even in lean PCOS, you'll have a little bit of belly fat. This is, the stuff around your waist that you just can't quite get rid of. So, doing the same sorts of support of the spleen and the stomach meridian, and also helping the liver function, so that instead of being a slightly excess long with a delayed ovulation, working with the liver meridian and the spleen and stomach meridians, we get your cycle back to a more normal cycle. It can help improve both your endocrine system, but also your reproductive system. So, Face Yoga with Eva just asked, the seed rotation for patients. Okay, I don't know that much about the seed rotation. I've heard about it in passing. I have not looked at it. Seeds are an excellent source of nutrients. I'm pretty sure it can't hurt to do something that involves, eating seeds. I would say, though, that there is no magic bullet. You can't just expect to eat seeds without shifting the other foods that you're eating and expect it to fix everything, because especially with the incredibly over-exaggerated testosterone levels and endocrine imbalances that come along with classic PCOS, there has to be a complete overhaul and change of everything, because we have to deal with, digestion, we have to deal with nutrition, we have to deal with the insulin resistance, we have to get everything in line on the endocrine side to improve the reproductive side. So just eating seeds appropriately, while it won't hurt, won't necessarily fix the endocrine system issues that come along with PCOS. So, does that help? All right. Does anybody else have any questions? No? Good. Okay. So, with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Don't forget that I'm doing another Instagram Live on the 24th at 10 o'clock with Eva. And we are going to talk about PCOS, in particular how it affects dermatology, because PCOS, has an effect on the face. Oh, and on hair. So if you've got thinning hair issues, or you think that the PCOS, if you're like, wait, I've got this sort of classic male pattern baldness sort of issue thing going up, that's the PCOS. And we will talk a little bit about how, to deal with a flare-up, how to maybe create some routines that help with the longer term issues, and then also how to deal with some of the hair issues that happen. Okay, so I'm going to stop the PCOS discussion now. If you're menopausal, do you mean what is the effect of PCOS on menopause? The Sagittarian Gemini 3 has asked, I know this is for fertility, but what if you're menopausal age? PCOS can actually affect menopause. Often women with PCOS, they actually have a longer cycle, because remember, part of what's going on with the PCOS is that you have more follicles that are coming up. What the testosterone does is it actually extends the amount of time. Oh, hold on just a moment. Let me post that. So, how do I type in there? It's so September 24 at 10. Okay, so the next Instagram Live is at September 24th at 10. So part of what happens, going back to the question about PCOS and menopause, part of what happens is that all of that excess testosterone creating all of this excess follicular activity, women with PCOS actually notice that their cycle, or the time that they are fertile, or at least the time that they are ovulating, actually goes longer. So if you hear these reports of women who are getting pregnant at 45, 46, 47, if they're not doing IVF, it's often because they have PCOS, okay? Now, just because you are ovulating up until the time you're 45, 46, 47, 48, doesn't necessarily mean that the follicles and the eggs are healthy, because the egg is still as old as you are, and there often tends to be more risk of some sort of congenital birth defect as a result. But yeah, women who have PCOS do tend to have like more delayed menopause as a result. You may also notice that your hot flashes are like worse, just because you've got that excess heat anyway. And so you feel crummy because you've got excess testosterone and you're going through the estrogen withdrawal at the same time. The other thing that can happen, though, is if you have lean PCOS, lean PCOS does funny things as women are getting older. You actually get a drop in DHEA when you're in your late 30s and early 40s. So it actually drops into a totally normal range. But you still have the excess testosterone, so you still have the delayed cycles, even though it may not show up on blood work, which is why, again, I go back to the hangry question a lot of the times for lean PCOS, because as women with lean PCOS get older, all of their blood values come back into normal range, but they have the hangry, and then sometimes they'll still have the delayed ovulation. Okay, so that's why it's really important to track your normal cycles. Whether or not you wind up with delayed, like late onset menopause or not, is a question in lean PCOS. It's not anything that I've seen any research on, and I haven't actually seen a whole lot of this in my clinic because a lot of my patients come in for fertility and then I don't expect to see them again for another 15 years. So I haven't had anybody quite in that range yet. But yeah, it absolutely will affect the onset of menopause and what menopause looks like in terms of the symptoms. So, and I hope that helped. Okay, do we have any other questions? Going once, going twice. Okay, so my two websites, if you want to look around and see what's available, actually the fertilityresetonline.com is probably a better website to go to, absolutely, for the recommendations for the PCOS helpful supplements. You will actually have to create an account. That's how you do that. But you can look around, because in my shop, it actually says, PCOS supplements, and you can see what it says. Be sure, if you decide to shop there, that you look on my page for the codes, because there are codes and you can actually get a discount on the orders. I give a bigger discount for the first order, but I discount all of them. They are absolutely cheaper than you can get them on Amazon, because when Designs for Health products are sold on Amazon, the Designs for Health company requires an increase of 10% in price, because they really want people getting these from practitioners who know how to prescribe them and know what to tell you to get. And I thank you all for coming today. I have appreciated the fact that you're here, and I look forward to seeing you on the 24th. Thanks so much. Have a great week.